Greetings, friends. You are on Ruslan Bailov's channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of September 30th, 2025. A large number of very important events have taken place today, so let's get started. Well then, let's move into the zone of the special military operation and talk about the events that occurred over the past 24 hours along the line of contact. We begin with the North Kupiansk direction, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation have improved their positions in the western and northwestern parts of the city of Kupiansk. Today, cartographers, mainly pro-Russian ones, reported that the Russian armed forces managed to strengthen their positions along the R79 road, cutting off the main logistical routes. Overall, it can be confidently stated that if this map you now see before your eyes reflects reality, then certain Ukrainian armed forces units have already fallen into a pocket near the railway station, stretching along the Kupianka River up to the R79 highway and further toward the Oskol River. Escaping from these positions is practically impossible now. Even if the Ukrainian side manages to retreat to the Oskol River, crossing it would be impossible. Russian drones are constantly patrolling the bridges. Again, if this map configuration corresponds to reality, then we can already start the countdown to when the western, northwestern, and possibly even southwestern parts of Kupiansk will fall under the firm control of the Russian armed forces. The North Kupiansk direction is not only about the city of Kupiansk itself. There are also settlements such as Kupiansk Uzlovoy, Kurilovka, and Novosinovo, among others. There still remains the possibility of crossing the Oskol River and holding a defensive line, but one thing is clear. Without Kupiansk, this will be extremely difficult. We will continue to watch how the situation unfolds, but overall it is evident that the fighting here has long passed its midpoint, and most likely we are now in the final stage. Next, we move to the Lyman sector of the front, which is also generating a lot of news. The most important is that yesterday evening, September 29th, 2025, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that Russian forces had completely cleared the settlement of Zareknoye, also known as Kirovo. Based on this report, the maps were updated accordingly. Yet some pro-Russian analysts this morning reported that immediately after the Defense Ministry's statement, Ukrainian forces launched a series of counterattacks from the southwest and northwest approaches to Zareknoye, apparently aiming to briefly re-enter the settlement, film some footage with Ukrainian soldiers raising flags in parts of the village, and later claim that the Defense Ministry's report was false. But this is not the first time Ukraine has used such tactics during the operation. The Russian army, anticipating counterattacks, did not allow Ukrainian troops to break through and re-establish themselves inside Zareknoye. All attacks were repelled and the Ukrainians retreated. Objective control footage shows FPV drones striking retreating or advancing Ukrainian units. Now, between Zareknoye and Lyman, there are no more settlements, only trenches and strongpoints, which hold little value since the entire area is under constant Russian drone surveillance. Supplying and maintaining a defense here in open fields will be extremely difficult. The distance along the O0528 road from Zareknoye to Lyman is now no more than 8 kilometers. Precisely 7.6 kilometers. It is unlikely Russian forces will push directly along the road, but rather repeat their 2022 approach through the forests toward the T-0514 and T-0513 routes into Lyman's southeastern side. Back then, the capture of this axis caused Lyman's defense to collapse. However, this time the skies are filled with drones, so the assault path may differ somewhat, but the overall idea remains. Before a direct assault on Lyman begins, there will almost certainly be a battle for Drobyshevo, which Ukraine will likely defend to the last. After the fall of Drobyshevo and Stavki, the battle for Lyman will begin, probably still in 2025. We now move to the Siversk sector. This direction is generating the largest number of geolocations today. Russian forces have established full fire control over all roads in and out of Siversk, from the east, north, and south. Ukrainian positions and drone operators are struck around the clock with artillery, rockets, and FAB bombs. Hundreds of drones patrol the skies, identifying targets and directing immediate strikes. Entry into Siversk is already impossible, and every Ukrainian position destroyed inside the city is another step toward its eventual storming. From the south, Russian forces continue advancing along the railway near Zvanivka and Vyemka. Supply roads are under full control. Ukrainian units tried to enter Zvanivka, but were hit and lost vehicles. Further northeast, Ukrainian positions along another rail line also came under Russian drone strikes. The area is being cleared. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the village of Mali Siversk has come under Russian control. It lies between Dronovka and Serebryanka, north of Siversk. Footage released shows Russian troops moving building to building, raising a flag. With Mali Siversk taken, Russian forces are now likely storming Dronovka, having possibly crossed the small Bakhmutka river. Once Dronovka and Yampol fall, the active assault on Siversk itself will begin. Moving on to the Konstantinovka sector, the map here has barely changed in days. Russian aviation continues strikes on the southwestern part of the town, where high-rise districts are concentrated. These areas may become the main entry point for an assault. Next, the northeast of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, where slight adjustments have appeared. Pro-Ukrainian sources report Ukrainian counterattacks from Vladimirovka toward the southeast, but so far no confirmed geolocations. On the other hand, Russian forces improved positions north of Poltavka, approaching Novopavlovka and Sofiyivka. Multiple sources, including neutral and Ukrainian mapping services, confirm this, along with drone footage. Evidence is growing that Russian troops are trying to enter Sofiyivka and cut supply roads, potentially encircling the entire Shakovo pocket soon. As for Pokrovsk itself, two things stand out. First, Russian forces are heavily bombing Mirnograd's eastern districts, apparently preparing for entry there. For now, only airstrikes are ongoing. Second, in Pokrovsk southwest, more footage shows Russian forces controlling the OR-0525 supply road. Every detected vehicle is immediately struck. Pokrovsk and Mirnograd have long been in operational encirclement. Supplies go in, but few get out. Russia is grinding them down. On the southern Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia fronts, for the first time in a long while, maps show no changes today. Although some sources claim Verbovoye was fully cleared, geolocations mainly show FPV drone strikes. This shift, from map updates to more strike footage, suggests Ukraine has reinforced its lines, while Russia is adapting tactics accordingly. Now let's talk about some important aspects of the configuration of the front on the Lyman axis. In the DPR, Russian forces have captured Kirovsk, or as it is now called on maps, Zareknoye, and this is not just another routine episode. This settlement effectively opens the road to Krasny Lyman for Russian troops. The question is, by what trick was Kirovsk taken, and how does this operation fit into the broader plan for liberating the northern areas of Donbass? The Russian Ministry of Defense announced the capture of Kirovsk, located in northern DPR about 10 kilometers from the city of Krasny Lyman, a major Ukrainian defensive hub, the last barrier before the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. Northward, the villages of Shandrigolovo and Derilovo have already been taken, while battles continue for Yampol to the south. In essence, only the village of Drobyshevo and the new Ukrainian positions at Stavki remain before Lyman. Kirovsk, known as Zarechnoye on Ukrainian maps, after being renamed in 2016 under decommunization, is located on the Zherebets River and shielded Krasny Lyman from the east. Just a couple of weeks ago, the situation on the flanks north and south of Kirovsk was unstable. To the south lay Yampol and the Serebryanka forest, where heavy fighting raged. Progress in the central sector only became possible after Ukrainian forces were expelled from the forest, allowing the southern flank to shift to Yampol and closer towards Siversk. On the northern flank, tensions persisted even after the capture of the Serebryanka forest. Understanding that the situation on the Krasny Lyman axis was worsening, Ukraine tried to reinforce the north by pulling additional troops from Lyman to the old sand quarry near Shandrigolovo on the Nitras River. For several days, the fighting centered on this small settlement, its riverbanks, and the flooded quarries around it. Shandrigolovo was also taken this Monday. Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov congratulated the command and personnel of the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division on the success. Their capture of Shandrigolovo secured the northern flank of the Krasny Lyman axis. The division advanced on the retreating enemy, occupied Derilovo, and approached Drobyshevo, crossing the Nitras River again. Meanwhile, Ukraine did not consider the central axis of the Krasny-Lyman direction as critical to the stability of its position. It built a new defensive line along the hamlets of Kolodez and Stavki. Geographically, this is steppe terrain, part of the so-called Bakhmut Basin. The open ground allowed Ukraine to deploy its now standard drone curtain to monitor the fields in the triangle of Shandrigolovo, Krasny, Lyman, Pokrovsk. At the same time, for some reason the Ukrainian armed forces considered Pokrovsk to be nearly an impregnable fortress. In reality, the settlement is just a large village without high-rise buildings. Ukrainian troops fortified private houses, assuming that the Russian armed forces would not attack the Krasny-Lyman axis head-on. In this, the Ukrainian command made a fatal mistake. During the night, Russian fighters crossed the Zherebets River and the flooded sand quarries by boat, suddenly appearing in the very center of the settlement. The element of surprise initially caused panic among the Ukrainian troops, and several colorful prisoners were captured from among the mobilized conscripts. After some time, the Ukrainians regrouped and began to resist the Russian assault groups. At that point, Russian aviation came to the aid of the assault units, striking deep into Ukrainian defensive lines. In desperation, Ukrainian commanders began setting fire to houses to slow the Russian advance. But it was already too late. Pokrovsk was fully taken by Monday, although mopping up operations against small Ukrainian groups hiding in basements continued for another day. It should be understood that the Ukrainian army deployed significant forces in the Pokrovsk area, up to 19 battalions, and practically every house had been converted into a strongpoint. Ukrainian units operated not only within the settlement, but also on the surrounding hills and wooded areas. The 63rd Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces also used the banks of the Zherebets River as a natural defensive line and heavily mined several sectors. Once the settlement was secured, Russian assault detachments quickly advanced into the forested areas south of Pokrovsk and entrenched there. This linked the front line with units of Russia's 25th Army, which for several days had been fighting street battles in nearby Yampol after advancing out of the Serebryanka forest through an ostrich farm. In Yampol itself, the eastern part of the town has already been captured, and fighting is ongoing in the center around the school and town council buildings. The Ukrainian side still retains the ability to receive supplies from Krasny-Lyman via a single road from the southwest, but cutting this line is only a matter of time. Yampol, located on a small elevation, is a significant tactical point in its own right. In the current situation, it will serve as a critical flanking position for the planned encirclement of Krasny-Lyman. Additionally, it cuts off the winding banks of the Siversk River. From this position, operations on the Siversk axis can also be controlled, especially along the railway and near the small village of Dronovka, which the Ukrainians tried to turn into a logistical hub for the northern flank of Siversk's defense. Russian forces in this area have already reached mine number 6, which shields Siversk directly, leaving Dronovka itself effectively encircled. Krasny-Lyman remains a difficult target. It lies only 20 kilometers from Slovyansk, in a straight line through the forest belts, and it is the last major fortified position, before the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration from the northeast. There is every reason to believe that Ukraine intends to defend the city to the last, especially since a Russian advance from Yampol to the main Lyman quarry and to the Seversky Donets River near the settlement of Ozanoy would establish a solid southern flank for the encirclement of Krasny-Lyman. On the northern sector, the Ukrainian army is retreating toward the small settlement of Novoselovka and attempting to set up a new defensive line at Drobyshevo. In the central sector, Ukrainian forces have already built a new defensive line directly in the open fields in front of the city, anchored to an old Soviet-era airstrip of the Lyman Light Aviation Airfield. Inside the city, positions have been fortified in the old industrial zones, particularly around the forestry base, the construction plant, and the fur farm. These defenses are not as strong as those in larger industrial cities, but Krasny-Lyman is split north to south by a railway. The defensive positions along the tracks, near warehouses, the locomotive depot, and stations could pose a serious challenge. In any case, after the capture of Pokrovsk and Shandrigolovo, the operation to encircle and blockade Krasny-Lyman and the grouping south of Siversk has entered its decisive phase. Strategically, this is part of a concentrated effort to envelop the entire northern Donbas region, including the large Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration, from 3 sides. And that's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and take care.